I didn't realize something was wrong with my roommate until I noticed how afraid he looked of being seen. Not scared of something outside the house, scared of me noticing what he was doing. At the time, I was in my early 20s, living in a small rental house with 3 other guys. None of us were close friends before moving in together. We just all graduated from the same college around the same time and ended up needing cheap housing fast. Splitting rent 4 ways made it possible to afford a modest house on the rural outskirts of the city, where everything closer to town was way too expensive. For the first 9 months, things were normal. Loud weekends, shared groceries, random movie nights, typical roommate stuff. Then, almost out of nowhere, 2 of the guys decided to move out. That left just me and KJ. Out of all 3 roommates, KJ was the one I knew the least. He was always gone, working late, coming home at strange hours, rarely hanging out or talking much. So of course, it felt like bad luck that he was the one I was left alone with. Financially, it sucked too. We were suddenly splitting rent in half instead of 4 ways. We agreed it wasn't sustainable and decided we'd both move out once the lease ended in 3 months. At first, I didn't mind having the house mostly to myself. I had days off where I'd barely see another human being. It was quiet, peaceful even. But after a few weeks, something started feeling off. KJ was almost never home, and when he was, he barely spoke. He only worked part-time mornings, yet somehow he was gone almost every night until very late. I figured maybe he had a busy social life I didn't know about. Still, the absence felt strange. Then one night, everything changed. It was around 1 a.m. I was still awake in my room when headlights swept across my window as a car pulled into the gravel driveway. A moment later, I heard the front door open. For some reason, I felt like saying hi, maybe just to break the awkward distance that had been building between us. I opened my bedroom door. Almost immediately, I heard footsteps rushing down the hallway. Fast, hurried, like someone had been caught doing something they weren't supposed to be doing. When I leaned my head out, KJ practically jumped. The hallway lights were off, so I could barely see him, but what I could see made my stomach tighten. His eyes were wide, his body was stiff. He was frozen just outside his bedroom door like a deer in headlights. "Hey, KJ," I said cautiously. "Just checking in. You good?" He didn't answer right away. He just stared at me from the darkness, eyes unnaturally open, face blank and tense. The silence stretched longer than it should have. Finally, he muttered, "Yeah, I'm good." Nothing else. Another awkward pause. I nodded slowly and went back into my room, closing the door behind me. The whole interaction left a strange chill crawling up my spine. Why had he been rushing? Why did he look panicked? Almost guilty. I tried to brush it off, but curiosity got the better of me. A couple of minutes later, I quietly cracked my door open and stepped into the hallway. I told myself I just wanted to pass by his door and listen for a second. Nothing more. As I approached, I heard frantic movement inside his room. Drawers opening and slamming shut. Objects shifting. Something scraping against wood. It sounded chaotic, like someone desperately searching for something or trying to hide something fast. I slowed my steps without realizing it. The sounds continued for several seconds, then suddenly stopped. Dead silence. It felt like he'd frozen on the other side of the door. A heavy sense of unease settled in my chest. Every instinct told me to get away from that hallway. I started to turn, and his door suddenly swung open. KJ stood in the doorway, staring straight at me with those same wide, restless eyes. My brain scrambled for an excuse. I was just heading to the kitchen," I said quickly. "You want anything?" He stared at me for another beat, then quietly muttered, "No," and closed the door in my face. My heart was pounding now. Something wasn't right with him. The way he moved, the way he stared, the way his room sounded like chaos one second and total silence the next. It all felt wrong. I actually went to the kitchen just to calm myself down, then went back to my room and locked the door. That night stayed quiet. But over the next several days, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was building. I started staying awake until KJ came home every night. I couldn't sleep until I heard him enter his room and everything went quiet again. His behavior kept getting worse. His eyes looked constantly restless, almost hollow. He spoke in one-word answers. He always rushed straight into his room without making eye contact. It felt like living with someone who wasn't fully there anymore. Then one night, while I was in bed trying to sleep, there was a knock on my door. I froze. I hadn't heard any footsteps in the hallway. The knock came again. Soft, careful, too close. My heart jumped into my throat. KJ never came to my room. Not once since the other guys moved out. I slid out of bed slowly, trying not to make any noise, and stepped toward the door. "Yeah?" I called, keeping my voice steady. No answer. I hesitated, then cracked the door open. KJ stood there in the dim hallway light. His eyes were darting slightly, restless like before. But this time there was something new on his face. A smile. Not a warm one. Not friendly. It looked forced, like his face was struggling to remember how to make the shape. "Hey," he said quietly. "I just got home. I think I dropped my wallet outside, in the driveway. You got a flashlight? Mind helping me look real quick?" The request caught me off guard. He'd never asked me for anything before. Ever. Still, part of me hoped this might be a chance to normalize things again. To convince myself I wasn't imagining all the weirdness. Yeah, sure," I said, grabbing my flashlight from the desk. We stepped outside together into the cool night air. Gravel crunched under our shoes as we walked down the driveway. He tried making small talk, asking about work, making casual comments. But his tone felt hollow, like lines being read from memory. Almost immediately, something didn't add up. His car was parked way down at the very end of the driveway, much farther than he ever parked before. If he really dropped his wallet near the house, why were we walking this far? We reached his car. I swept the flashlight beam across the gravel. Nothing. No wallet, no movement, no signs of anything dropped. Then KJ kept walking, past the car, toward the dark tree line at the edge of the property. That's when my nerves spiked. "Why are we going this way?" I asked. He paused for a moment like he was calculating something. "Oh, I think I went for a short walk earlier. Might have dropped it out here." The explanation didn't feel real. His voice sounded disconnected, rehearsed. And the deeper we went toward the woods, the more my stomach tightened. I slowed my steps. "I think we should just head back," I said. "It's probably closer to the house." He shook his head slightly. "It'll only take a second. It's probably right over here." He gestured deeper into the darkness. Every instinct in my body screamed no. My grip tightened on the flashlight. "Here," I said, forcing a calm tone. "You take the flashlight. I'm gonna head back. I've got work early." I held the flashlight out toward him. He didn't take it. His smile slowly faded. The restless energy in his eyes sharpened into something darker. Something angry, disappointed, like a mask slipping off. He just stared at me. The silence felt heavy, pressurized, dangerous. I didn't wait for him to respond. I turned around and started walking quickly back toward the house. I glanced over my shoulder once. KJ was still standing there near the trees, watching me, completely still, not moving, not blinking, just watching. The moment I reached the house, I went straight to my room and started packing. I didn't care how crazy it felt. I didn't feel safe under the same roof as him anymore. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my bed fully dressed, listening for any sound in the hallway. Any door opening, any footsteps, any movement. Nothing came. KJ never came back into the house that night. When the sun came up, I loaded everything important into my car and left. I didn't leave a note. I didn't wait for explanations. I just left. Years later, I still don't know what was going on with him. I never heard from KJ again, but I'm convinced that if I had followed him into those woods that night, I wouldn't have made it back. Next story. I didn't realize someone had been living inside our house with us until the night I saw him standing in my roommate's bedroom. Not sneaking, not hiding, just standing there in the dark, like he had been waiting for me to notice. And the worst part? We had been hearing his footsteps for days. This happened in my early 20s, when I was sharing a small rental house on the rural edge of town with my roommate. I'll call him Mark. We met in college and ended up renting together after graduation. We weren't best friends or anything, more like compatible strangers who split rent and respected each other's space. It worked well enough. For almost 2 years, nothing unusual ever happened in that house. Quiet nights, normal routines, no strange noises beyond the occasional creak or gust of wind. That changed one summer. It was a normal weekday night. Mark and I both got home late from work, chatted for a bit in the kitchen, then headed to our rooms. The house went quiet around midnight. Sometime later, I woke up to a familiar sound, footsteps. Slow, deliberate creaks moving across the hallway floor. At first, I didn't even open my eyes. Half asleep, I assumed Mark had gotten up for water or the bathroom. The old floors always announced every step. I checked the clock out of habit. 3:02 a.m. I rolled over and went back to sleep. The next morning, as I was rushing out the door for work, Mark stepped into the hallway looking exhausted. "Hey," he said slowly. "Were you walking around last night?" I stopped. "No," I answered. "I thought that was you." We stared at each other for a second, both confused. He shrugged it off, saying maybe the house settled or the wind moved something. I agreed. Old houses make weird sounds. It wasn't worth overthinking. I left for work and didn't think about it again. That night, almost the exact same thing happened. I woke up to the sound of footsteps again, slow creaking boards moving down the hallway toward the living room. This time I stayed awake, listening. The steps moved steadily across the house, then stopped. Silence. About 30 seconds passed. Something about the pattern bothered me. The sound wasn't random like wood popping or pipes shifting. It traveled, like a person walking from one end of the house to the other. I got out of bed and cracked my door open. The hallway was empty. The living room lights were off. Mark's bedroom door was closed. Nothing looked out of place. Still uneasy, I went back to bed. The next morning we talked about it again. Neither of us had been up. Neither of us could explain it. We laughed it off, but the tension lingered. That afternoon, Mark had the day off while I worked a late shift. I didn't get home until close to 11. As I walked down the hallway toward my room, something caught my attention. Mark's bedroom door was open. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw him sitting on the edge of his bed, barely lit by faint hallway light. His posture was stiff, unmoving. "Hey man," I said casually as I passed. "What's up?" No response. I assumed he had headphones in or didn't hear me. I went into my room, changed clothes, then stepped back out toward the kitchen to grab something to eat. When I passed his room again, the light was off. He was still sitting there, now almost completely in darkness. I stopped at his doorway. "Mark," I called. "You good?" No answer. Something about it made my stomach tighten. The way he just sat there, silent, unmoving, in the dark. I told myself I was overreacting and went to the kitchen. 15 minutes later, I walked back down the hallway. His door was closed now. That night, I stayed in my room for about an hour, scrolling on my phone, trying to relax. When I heard it again, the creaking, slow footsteps moving down the hallway. Then something brushed lightly under my door, a shadow. My nerves spiked instantly. Instead of opening the door, I grabbed my phone and texted Mark. "Hey, is that you walking around?" A minute passed, then another. Finally, a reply popped up. "What are you talking about? I'm not home right now." My heart dropped into my stomach. I stared at the message, rereading it again and again. Not home, but I had just seen him sitting on his bed. I slowly stood up and opened my door. The hallway was empty. Mark's bedroom door was open. dark inside, silent. I took a step closer, and that's when I saw him. Standing in the center of Mark's bedroom was a man I had never seen before. Tall, broad shoulders, a thick beard catching faint light from the hallway. He wasn't Mark. He was facing me, completely still, watching. For half a second, my brain refused to accept what my eyes were seeing. The shape in the room didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't speak. He just stood there, tall and rigid in the darkness, his outline barely separated from the shadows around him. This wasn't my roommate. Every instinct in my body screamed danger. I felt a wave of ice rush through my chest as my brain finally caught up to reality. Someone was inside our house, and he had been there long enough to make himself comfortable. We locked eyes. I couldn't see his face clearly, but I could tell he was looking straight at me. The hallway light reflected faintly off what looked like a thick beard and hollow eyes. Neither of us moved. The silence stretched, heavy, suffocating. My heart began hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears. I took one slow step backward. The floor creaked. That tiny sound shattered whatever fragile stillness existed between us. The man shifted his weight slightly. Not toward me, not away. Just enough to show that he was very real. That was all I needed. I turned and sprinted. I flew down the hallway, nearly slipping on the hardwood floor, shoved the front door open, and burst into the cold night air barefoot. I didn't even bother grabbing shoes or my phone charger. I only had my phone in my hand and pure adrenaline in my veins. I ran across the street, heart pounding like it might explode, and called the police with shaking fingers. I didn't stop moving until I reached the opposite sidewalk, turning back only long enough to make sure no one was chasing me out of the house. The front door remained closed, dark, silent, too calm. The dispatcher stayed on the line with me while officers were sent out. Every second felt like an hour. My eyes stayed locked on the house, waiting for the door to swing open again. When the police finally arrived, they went inside with flashlights and searched every room. The man was gone. No signs of forced entry, no broken doors, no shattered windows. The only thing they found was one window in the back that wasn't fully locked. But there were no fingerprints, no clear footprints, nothing to explain how or when someone had entered. What terrified me most wasn't that he got away. It was realizing that the footsteps we had been hearing for days weren't imagined. Someone had been walking through our hallway while we slept. Someone had been sitting on my roommate's bed in the dark, waiting. Later that night, Mark came home after hanging out with a friend. When I told him everything, his face went pale. That night had been the only evening that week he hadn't been home, which meant whoever that man was, he likely expected Mark to be alone in the house, waiting, planning. We moved out as soon as we legally could. I never stayed another night in that house. Even now, years later, I still wake up sometimes in the middle of the night, listening for the sound of slow footsteps moving across a floor that shouldn't be moving at all. Because the scariest part isn't knowing someone broke into your house. The scariest part is realizing they were already inside. Next story. I didn't realize how dangerous it was to trust a stranger until I woke up and saw her standing inside my bedroom. Not speaking, not moving, just watching me in the dark, like she'd been there for a long time. And the worst part, she wasn't supposed to be in my room at all. Back in 2015, I was 23 and trying to save money by finding a roommate. At the time, Craigslist was still one of the main ways people found apartments and roommates. It wasn't flooded with scams the way it is now, and honestly, most people I knew had used it at least once. I posted a listing with a few photos of my apartment and made it clear that I was looking for someone close to my age. I didn't want a huge lifestyle mismatch or anything awkward. A few days later, I got a message from a woman named Hannah. She said she was also 23, still in college, and looking for a place close to campus. We talked on the phone for a while, and the conversation flowed surprisingly well. Same interests, similar schedules, same general personality. She sounded normal, friendly, and easy to get along with. Nothing raised any red flags. So I invited her over to see the apartment. When she came by, everything seemed fine. She liked the place. We agreed on the rent split. And within a week, she moved in. There was only one thing I noticed right away. She didn't really look her age. She was slightly taller than me, carried herself in a more mature way, and had this older, almost tired look in her face. Not in a bad way, just not what I expected from someone who claimed to be my age. I brushed it off. Some people just look older than they are. The first few days passed quietly. We barely crossed paths because our schedules didn't line up well. I worked late shifts, and she balanced college with a part-time job. We exchanged small talk in the kitchen, polite hellos, nothing more. It felt normal. Until the fifth night. I got home from work around 10 p.m. The apartment was quiet when I unlocked the door. The moment I stepped inside, I suddenly heard footsteps rushing down the hallway, fast, almost panicked, followed immediately by a door slamming shut. I froze. Confused, I dropped my bag and walked toward the hallway that led to both of our bedrooms. Hannah's door was closed, and I could see light glowing underneath it. My door, however, was open. I knew for a fact I had closed it before leaving that morning. That made my stomach tighten. I didn't like the idea of someone going into my room, even accidentally. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. I checked around, drawers, desk, closet, bed. Nothing looked disturbed. Nothing was missing. No obvious signs that anyone had touched anything. Still, the unease lingered. I tried to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe I'd forgotten to close the door properly. Maybe the airflow pushed it open. Maybe I was overthinking it. I sat down, turned on the TV, and tried to relax. An entire hour passed. I didn't hear Hannah move at all. No footsteps, no doors, no noise from her room. I assumed she had gone to bed early, like she'd mentioned before. Then, without thinking, I glanced toward my bedroom door. And that's when I noticed it. A shadow. Right beneath the crack of the door. Someone was standing directly outside my room, not walking, not shifting, just standing there. How long had she been there? My heart started pounding. "Hannah?" I called out softly. No response. The shadow didn't move. "Hannah, are you out there?" I tried again, louder this time. Several long seconds passed before the shadow slowly slid away from the door. I heard quiet footsteps retreating down the hallway, followed by her bedroom door slamming shut. My hands were shaking. What was she doing just standing there? I locked my door immediately and stayed awake much longer than usual, listening for any movement in the apartment. Eventually, exhaustion took over, and I fell asleep. The next morning, I saw Hannah in the kitchen. Trying not to sound accusatory, I casually mentioned what happened the night before and asked if she needed something. She smiled, calm, relaxed, and said everything was fine. End of conversation. It felt wrong, but I didn't push it. I didn't want to create tension so soon after moving in together. A few hours later, she left for class, and I went to work. That night, I came home around the same time, about 10:30. The apartment was dark and quiet. All the lights were off, including in her room. I assumed she was already asleep. I went into my bedroom quietly, closed the door, FaceTimed a friend for a bit, then decided to take a shower before bed. While the water was running, I thought I heard something faint outside my room. I turned the water down slightly and listened. Nothing. I finished showering, dried off, and stepped back into my room. That's when I noticed the door to the hallway was open. I was almost certain I had closed it. My nerves spiked. I got dressed quickly and peeked into the hallway. All the lights were still off. Hannah's room was silent. I closed my door again, locked it. This time, I was absolutely sure. I sat on my bed trying to calm myself down, replaying everything in my head. Maybe she had tried to ask me something earlier. Maybe she saw the bathroom light on and backed away. Maybe I was letting paranoia take over. Still, the feeling wouldn't leave. After about an hour of restless TV watching, I finally turned everything off and lay down to sleep. It felt like only seconds passed before my eyes snapped open again. The apartment was silent, pitch black, and my bedroom door was slightly open, just a few inches. My blood ran cold. I knew I had locked it, and I never heard it open. "Hannah?" I whispered. No answer. The silence felt heavy, suffocating. My eyes adjusted to the darkness, scanning the room, and that's when I saw her, standing in the corner near my wardrobe, motionless, facing me. She didn't speak. She didn't move. She just stood there in the dark, a tall, silent shape barely separated from the shadows. My heart felt like it was trying to tear itself out of my chest. For a split second, my brain refused to process what I was seeing. I honestly thought I was still dreaming. Sleep paralysis, a trick of the darkness, anything but the reality standing in front of me. "Hannah?" I whispered again, my voice barely audible. She didn't respond. She didn't blink. She didn't shift her weight or breathe loud enough for me to hear. The silence stretched so long it felt unreal. As my eyes adjusted further, I could make out more of her outline. Her shoulders, the shape of her hair, the faint reflection of light catching her face. Her expression looked empty, not angry, not surprised, just blank, hollow, like she was staring straight through me instead of at me. Every instinct in my body screamed to move, to run, to scream, but I was frozen. Then she took one slow step forward. My breath caught in my throat. Her foot barely made a sound against the floor, but it felt deafening in the quiet room. The movement snapped me out of my paralysis. My muscles tensed, adrenaline flooding through me. She took another step, and then, without warning, she suddenly turned and bolted toward the door. She didn't brush past me. She didn't hesitate. She just sprinted straight out of my room and into the hallway. A second later, I heard her bedroom door slam shut. The sound echoed through the apartment like a gunshot. I sat there for half a second in stunned silence. Then reality crashed back in all at once. I grabbed my phone, my keys. I didn't even bother putting on shoes. I ran. I flew out of the apartment, down the stairs, and into the parking lot, my heart pounding so hard it made me dizzy. I didn't stop until I was in my car with the doors locked. Even sitting there, I felt exposed, like she could suddenly appear out of nowhere. I pulled out of the lot and drove several blocks away into a quiet neighborhood before finally stopping. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone as I called the police. I explained everything: the strange behavior, the shadows under the door, the locked bedroom, waking up to find her standing inside my room. The dispatcher told me officers were on the way. It took about 15 minutes for them to arrive at the apartment. By the time we went back inside together, Hannah was gone. Her room was nearly empty. Most of her belongings had vanished: clothes, bags, personal items, as if she had packed in a rush and disappeared. There was no sign of forced entry, no note, no explanation. It was like she had never planned on coming back. The officers started trying to contact her using the information I had: phone number, name, details from the Craigslist messages. That's when things got even worse. The phone number was a prepaid burner phone. No registered owner, no billing information, nothing traceable. Her name didn't match any records connected to the number or the email she used. The ID she claimed to have? Never verified, as far as anyone could tell. Hannah didn't exist. Whoever she really was had fabricated everything: her name, her contact information, her background. She had created an identity just convincing enough to move into a stranger's apartment and live there unnoticed. The realization made my skin crawl. I kept replaying the image of her standing in my room, silent, emotionless, watching me sleep. How many nights had she done that before I ever noticed? How long had she been opening my door, standing there, observing me? What would have happened if I hadn't woken up? What would have happened if I hadn't locked the door earlier? The officers couldn't give me any real answers. There were no fingerprints worth tracing, no cameras in the building, no witnesses who had seen her leave. She vanished as cleanly as she appeared. I moved out of that apartment shortly afterward. I couldn't sleep there anymore. Every shadow felt wrong. Every creak made my heart race. Even years later, I still catch myself checking my door locks twice before bed. Sometimes I still think about her empty stare in the darkness. Not angry, not emotional, just watching. And I honestly believe that if I had stayed roommates with her any longer, something far worse would have happened, whatever her intentions were. I'm glad I never found out.